All right, let's do this. So, the core question I'd like to ask you both to start us off the interview portion of this thing is how has living in America as musicians changed you as people, if at all? Like, obviously, it's a different lifestyle. The sun is out. How has being in America, creating as a band in America, changed you as people, if at all? Either one of you can start.
You can go, Luke.
I eat more burgers and I've got more of a twang in my accent now. No, honestly, I've been over here probably most of my adult life. So, if I think back to when I first moved here, it's a bit hazy actually, the exact year, but it was the early 2000s and it was when I joined Amen. And so I basically moved over here as a young drummer that had been asked to join an American punk band. And so, I was kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I was living just outside of Hollywood. So to me, I was like living in the greatest place on earth. I didn't really know like the darker underbelly of Hollywood, and the kind of fact that not many people stick around. It's like a very transient place. So I think early on I was kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and now I kind of like I've settled into my American life, right? So I think I've lived in America some. If not half my life, more than half my life. So I've probably been
Must be more now.
more of an American than a Brit at this point, which, any family members reading or watching this or listening would probably be cringing. So
They are gothic, right?
I still claim, but no, I think, I was always heavily influenced as a kid by American rock music. It was sort of the second wave of music that I got into, right? So like, as a very young child, I was listening to Dire Straits. I remember having a cassette player, yeah, and having Dire Straits on my cassette player. It was a bright yellow cassette player, Walkman rather. And so growing up then, my dad worked in the kind of British indie scene. So I was very much into those early to sort of like mid 90s indie bands, right? Like that were kind of just exiting the 80s and like coming out with that sort of first wave of stuff. And I was like going to shows with my dad, like I'd go and see In Spiral Carpets, Charlatans, The Farm, right? Like all of that stuff. And so like I was really into like that music growing up. And then probably when I was about 13, I got hit over the head with Smashing Pumpkins. And then that was like the biggest musical influence moment, right? Like that I probably had, where I was like, what is this? It sounds so different, right? Like it's way more aggressive, it's more up tempo. The drums are like I'm listening to baggy indie,
Yeah.
Right? And it's like the drums are just chops in. I was like, what? And so listening to Gish, that just clouded me over the head, right? So from then, obviously, that opened the door to everything from like Nirvana, Alice in Chains, right? All of those kind of bands, Mudhoney, Sonic Youth, and so I just got like immersed in all of that. And then, primarily, I'd say I was already listening to American music, so I think the American influence was already bleeding through onto me, like creatively as a kid. My first proper band that I was playing shows with, like we covered Lemonheads, we covered Smashing Pumpkins, like the shows and any songs that we'd written. We got 5 of our own songs, and they all basically sounded like real budget Smashing Pumpkins songs anyway. So it was like, I feel like I was Americanized in my musical taste from that point onwards. Like the British indie stuff has never left me, right? Like I still listen to like all of that kind of stuff. And I definitely think there's sometimes a little bit of an influence of that, the New Order, Joy Division kind of stuff that I was heavily into as a kid. I think in some aspects when we're doing kind of like bendy, blissed out leads and stuff in our music, I think there's kind of a little bit on that. I don't think people would detect it and be like, oh, that's like Joy Division or New Order, but ultimately that's where it comes from, like those kind of leads that are soaking in reverb. So yeah, that was kind of my thing, and it's only just gotten more since I've been over here, you know what I mean? In fact, I would almost say that like it reached a critical mass to the point where I started leaning back into the stuff that was more British, from my youth, you know what I mean? So yeah, Lee, I'll pass the duchy to you.
I mean, moving out here made me not write angry songs anymore, because obviously my old band was super angry, and then moved out here sunny and it was lovely, and I didn't want to write angry songs anymore because I guess I wasn't that angry anymore because you're not in rain and being poor as fuck. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the only thing of moving to the States. I will say that there is zero music scene out here. I mean, now me and Luke don't even live in LA anymore. We all just spread. Luke lives in Arizona. I live up in like the mountains near Big Bear. So we're really spread out. So none of us live in LA anymore. I think Steve is the only one that wants to live in LA still. The rest of us have no interest in it whatsoever. But yeah, I don't know if it has influenced my music. Again, like Luke, I have got back into 90s English bands more. I don't know if that's to counterbalance being in America. I don't know what that is, but yeah, it's hard to write angry music anymore when it's a nice place, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe
We just write down the music.
Yeah, super sad songs about being old geriatric fucks.
I mean, that was going to be my next point. You guys seem, you seem happy out there, and Lowlives seems to be a culmination of what has gone before. There was a lot of, without going into too much detail, your band's courted a lot of controversy for various reasons, previous bands you've been in. And it feels like to me, Lowlives is kind of like I don't know, even though you're making, kind of grungy sonic, music sonically, it feels like you guys are in a happy place. I don't know if that tracks with you as the creators,
Yeah.
but from an outside perspective, that's what I feel like.
I think, like, for me, it's definitely a musical safe space, right? Like, the reality is I was done with music, right? After like the things that I went through, I was done with music. And, but obviously, like, I'm also plagued by music, right? Like, music is amazing and uplifts me, but it's also a double-edged sword, right? Like, I'm cursed by music because I just can't not do music, right? And it's so hard these days to, like, you have to do something else besides be a musician, right? I got to pay my bills, and let's face it, I'm not doing that through music, right? You know what I mean? Like, I think those days are past. But the reality of it is I was done with music, and then I got this craving to do music, but I was like, I'm never gonna like probably play live again, or like, I'm done, maybe I'll just write. And then I met Lee, right? And so the right person at the right time for me, right? And I think probably for him too, because he was kind of trying to set something up, and we were just, I like to think the universe sets things up, man, and the universe just pushed us together at the right time. So for me, meeting him, I was kind of like, we had a drink down the pub, we have similar interests, we just, I don't know, man, it clicked, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, like, it's like doing a band with your best mate, right? Like, this guy's like, we just get each other. And so, like, for me, I was kind of like, that was comfortable. And so, like, when we were writing songs, we didn't really have to try. Like, I think in the innocence of the initial writing of all the initial batch, like, we call that an album because it was initially intended to be an album. But obviously with the pandemic, we didn't put it out as an album. We broke it up into singles with 2 songs released. So it never kind of amalgamated into being an album. But that original album, I think there's a lot of innocence to what we were doing, because we would just get together, write tunes, and then we'd just be grinning at like how quick it was coming together. Yeah. We didn't really stress about structuring it or targeting it. We just like, make something that makes you happy. And then if it makes you happy, maybe it makes someone else happy, right? So I think that there was no premeditation, and not to say there is on the newer stuff. I definitely think we as writers tried to target a little bit more with the new stuff. Like, we wanted to balance a record with like a journey, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like there's heavier songs, and there's like slower paced songs. There's, even an acoustic song on the upcoming record. So, I think for us, that innocence and that safe space for me, I was happy with it, and then we didn't ever intend it to be a band. We were just like, let's just write some music together. And then it was like, this is too fun for it not to be a band. So we got more mates involved, and here we are,
Yeah.
It was no pressure. Like, we just got together, and it was like, like when you play in a band, like, say when you're 14, you start your first band, and you're like, everyone wanted to be Nirvana at that point. So, or Green Day. Fucking 3. Do you remember like when you got another person to come and play guitar, and you'd play Today by Smashing Pumpkins, one would play lead, one would play, it was that similar feeling when we got together at Luke's house, because like we hung out in the pub first and we're like, this is going to be cool, but like the first day we got together to actually like sit and record something, it was just like that instant feeling of, it was fucking amazing. And then just that feeling also when you're driving in the car on the way home, listening to the stuff that you've done, and have that excitement back after years of not having it was like something like mega special. So, and I feel like it's almost that now, because we don't live that close to each other anymore. So when we get together, we do batches of songs at a time. Like I was just at Luke's like a month or so ago doing songs, and since then all I've done is just listen to those songs. It was nice to just feel like stoked on music, you know, like
Yeah, man.
I think that's it. I think that the reality of the situation is, right, like we both came from bands where we were also trying to pay our bills, right? And I think once like money gets involved, or there needs to be like the need to survive from the art, I think allows pollution of the art, right? Like, you know, like you might do something that you wouldn't normally do if you were kind of like, I don't need to get paid from this. And I think like, obviously we're not trying to, we basically pay for our art right now, right?
Yeah.
Like up until the point where we just signed with Spinefarm, everything we paid for. To go on tour, we lost money every tour and paid for it out of our pocket, but we didn't care, because ultimately, like, you know, it makes us so happy to go and do that, like that we do it, you know? So I think the only premeditated part of this band is like how we wanted to be perceived live and energy wise with the music. I think that's the only premeditated part, and that ultimately stems from one single video, right? And both me and Lee have this absolute obsession with Foo Fighters 1995 headline set at Brixton Academy, right? If you look at that video and you just watch that show, it's everything about how we want to be as a band, right? Like in this era of like technology driven music, right? And backing tracks and everything syncing up with the lights and that, right? Like we go back and look at a band that's just screaming, dripping energy and like charisma, and just, it's just like literally, it just looks like a ball of sweat dripping off the stage, oozing that.
Man.
And we've always got to make sure whenever we're trying to do our live shows, this is like how we want to be. Raw, analog, no tricks, right?
Yeah.
And 4 people making music and you know, bringing that energy.
That's good, man. I think that's one of the things that I've loved watching you guys live and watching you guys progress is that raw energy and that honesty. I remember, I think it was a previous interview one of you guys did where you were talking about how like LA and the US, there's a lot of backing tracks. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of that, whereas you guys wanted to, you know, strip it back and create a band that had that raw energy. And that's certainly what, you know, I hear as a listener. Before we
Don't get me wrong, real quick, Dom.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I don't dislike bands that do that by any means. I actually listen to a lot of bands that do that, and I think it's amazing. I just think for this band, we were like, we wanted to be a low tech band. Both of us came from bands that had some technology aspects of it, right? And so, you know, it's I definitely don't want to seem like I'm bagging on any bands that use technology, because, you know, you take a band like Bring Me, like one of the greatest bands in the world right now playing, man. It's like their shows are insane. The music is insane. They're breaking down new sonic boundaries with their records. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think for us, we wanted to be a low tech band with like 4 people making 4 individual noises together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see what you mean actually, but yeah, like I said, I see what you mean. Like I think everybody has a different viewpoint on this, but Bring Me, Luke, like you said, like there's something really powerful about that. So technology has its place, you know.
Yeah,
technology has its place, but and you'd been through that, Luke. You'd been through that, Lee. You'd been through that. You'd experienced that, but you wanted to strip it back, is what I've heard from there.
We're basically a low tech band in a high tech era. That's how I feel like we are. We're literally like, I don't think, you know, there isn't many bands just trying to be a 4-piece band these days. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of embracing of technology, and that's cool, you know, but I think just for what we wanted to do, like, and what we were heavily influenced by in our youth, it happens to that, you know. When you go back and watch like Nirvana playing Reading and stuff, right, it's like 3 geezers on stage just tearing it down, it not even in tune sometimes.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's just like, what the hell's going on? But it's kind of like, you just like, it's psychotic a little bit, and you're kind of like, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you remember that show. You remember that show. You remember the raw energy of it, just like you remember Bring Me for, like for the pure spectacle of it. I think Enter Shikari is another good example of that. But then, like you're talking about stripping it back, that raw energy that people will remember.
yeah.
And on that note, before we talk about the new record and the future, I do want to go back and ask you individually, Luke and Lee, what lessons have you taken? What have you learned about yourselves? You mentioned, you've been doing this since you were kids. You've moved countries. You've seen the best, and again, without going into too much detail, the worst of the music industry and what can happen. So individually, whoever we want to start, that's fine. What have you learned about yourself, and how would you say you've changed and developed through your previous experiences to now working on Lowlives stuff?
I think it sounds a bit weird. I think when you're young and if your band gets any kind of relative success, it is hard for it to not be a bit ego-y at times. And there's definitely things I look back in my old band where I'm like, oh, I was a bit of a dick then about percentage cuts, like stuff, just shitty little stuff. It's always business related. So there's stuff like that. I think I was a bit too much of a cocky shit before. So I think I've definitely, I don't know, even now, like recently I spoke to our old drummer, Paul, and, me and him, we used to butt heads quite a lot and stuff in the Defiled, but now it's quite nice to, even recently, he was like, oh, you've really like totally changed now the way you are. I'm like, yeah, I guess. I mean, I think he has also too, but it's just, I think you just learn from your mistakes. And I think we have definitely learned from our older mistakes in this band. I mean, we're fucking grown, full ass grown men now. You can't let petty shit get to your head anymore, man. You just gotta just enjoy it. You know what I mean? And that's what, again, this whole point of this band is just we're doing this because this, we all have full-time jobs and we all, we struggle to get through. So doing this band is our holiday. Do you know what I mean? So we have to make it count. Like we're not petty, vindictive little shits.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with that. Like, for me, it's more like if we started off when we were young, right? Like all I cared about was like, get a record deal and then like have this be my full-time job, my full-time life, right? Like a touring musician, just playing, visiting multiple countries around the world. And like, being around that from a young age as well. My dad was obviously, in the music business. And so I'd go to shows that he was, with bands that he was managing, I'd see what they were doing, I was just so hungry. And I think that probably that's been a bit of a detriment sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, I think I've cared too much. And so it was nice to go back to ground zero, starting this band. Because I think like, there was a period of time when I was younger where you make music and you just want to rebel, right? You're kind of going against the grain and like, oh, that artist is number one, F them, right? Like, you kind of, I'm not into that shit. I don't want to be popular, but you do want to be popular, but you want to be punk, right? Like this whole thing, right? Like you're kind of confused. And the reset button of my personal journey was kind of like over time I'm going like, and I finally get to that point where I'm like playing festivals and shows of a size that I'd always dreamed of. And arguably that wasn't my band. Like, I joined that band, but I was still like enjoying what we were doing, but there was obviously a load of politics, a load of baggage and a load of other shit going on. And so like it kind of marred it a little bit. So going back down to ground zero and like, getting that start again, and then realizing like when me and Lee started that like, well, we both have jobs, so we don't need to make money right now. Let's just, the innocence came back. And I think that's what I've learned to try and preserve when we do start doing things, right? Like there's been periods where we've gone through hard times with this band and the stress level starts coming up. And then like usually when I have that moment of clarity, I remember like, whoa, why were we doing this? This doesn't have to be stressful. Because if it's stressful, there's no point in doing it, right? Like at this point in my life, I only want things that make you happy and make you a better person, to be in my life, right? So
Yeah.
band like will always be in my life until it doesn't do that anymore, right? You know what I mean? And so I think we've all been aware, like sometimes, we've been on the side of the road in Ghent when a tour's been cancelled and we don't have any money and it's non-refundable tickets for everything, right? And the entire tour got cancelled and the stress levels building up.
Yeah.
And we all kind of look at each other and be like, this is ridiculous. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Like, let's just try and book our own headline tour, having only played 3 shows. And we did that, right? And then it became a laugh. And now it's the running joke, right? Like, we did a headline tour with 1 song out and only having, 3 shows under our belt. So I think it's all about managing the stress and making sure everything is a fun experience, right? Like, because the minute it turns into a business, if you're making money out of it, cool, right? Like maybe you're in a massive band and it's super lucrative. It's not fun anymore, but it's your job, right? So it's like switched. I think trying to avoid that, like, I mean, the perfect hybrid for us would be being successful enough that we'd never have to put money into it again. And maybe make a bit of money from it, but keeping that enjoyment and keeping the inspiration that we have right now and the kind of like, it's exciting to go and write and do the cycle. I think that's what I've learned most is trying to preserve the core reason of why we do that, the innocence of it,
Yeah, man, absolutely, and I think that's a really pure answer, man, and I love it, and it's good to hear that you're in that place. In terms of just because you talked about the realities of being in the band, kind of working, not living close to each other, I do want to ask about kind of how this band pushes you in new ways compared to your previous work. In what ways does this band challenge you and excite you in ways that no matter what levels you got to, and I know you both got to very great levels in in your different bands. What ways does Lowlives challenge you? Managing time to jam to create songs. The admin side of it, for example. In what ways does this band challenge you, kind of in fresh ways compared to your previous work?
Go on, Lee. You can start that off.
You go.
Okay, I've got it. If you need to consider more, I've got it. Like for me, I have 3 kids,
Right.
and I have a full-time job, right? So like I work for Drum Workshop, the drum company, right? And so it's a pretty demanding job, and I've like my family life is busy. So what I notice about then versus now, like then, I thought I was busy, right? We would tour. Traditionally we would tour, I think it was 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off when we were on cycle, right? So like the amount I didn't have to set gear up. We had techs, like I could get out of the bunk on the bus whatever time I wanted in the day or peel out my hotel room. The amount of stuff, if I'd have known now what like if I knew then what I know now, like the amount of stuff, my productivity would have been through the roof. I'd have probably had side projects, side albums, because the reality is I'm sat in my studio right now and this is actually the first time that I've sat in here in 2 weeks.
Right.
And so it's like Lee came out, we had focus recording session, like my drums are still set up in the background for doing it, and then I was doing some video content playthroughs. And since that, like it's all stalled because work got crazy. My kids, they do sports and all that stuff. My son plays footy. My daughter does like theatre class. And so, and then there's other things that come up, right? Like we just had Christmas and all that. So I think the reality is I'm way more productive and focused when I got to do something now. I actually have a day this week that I've kind of blacked out on my calendar that I'm just coming in here for 8 hours to get things done. I've got to edit like a playthrough video for the next single and all this stuff. So I have to be a lot more targeted and assertive with making the holes to be able to do it. Whereas before I wasn't assertive. It didn't feel like time was a problem. I thought, this forever, and I realized how precious time is now, considering I don't get a lot of it, right? So yeah, that's my kind of situation from then to now,
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I just
Lee?
wish I definitely wish I had enjoyed it more when I had it good back in the day. That's for sure. Like everything was you're just miserable and stressed. You're young, you know what I mean? Just getting hammered every day. I definitely wish I took a moment back then to sit back and be like, fuck, we're on a bus. This is cool shit. And again, what Luke says too, because you just end up just staying in a bus doing jack shit all day. Whereas I feel like now when we tour now, like, you know, we're back, you know, we're in vans, we're in shitty hotels. Like I actually
I
enjoy
love
it
it.
more, I
I
think,
love it.
because like I don't know, yeah. Because that's what I missed. Do you know what I mean? Like I missed the spark of when your band is doing fun, cool shit. And I feel like we're kind of back to that. And that's what like I mean, I can't wait to get back to this year. We're just waiting on fucking shows, man. That's all I want to do. I don't want to go on holiday. I don't want to do anything. I want to go in the rain, sit in a fucking van and eat Greg's and drink bottles and go play a show in a shitty bar. That's I want to do that.
Did we ever post the video of you spreading your bun with the COVID test?
Should though. We should.
We
That was
should.
good.
So contextually, Dom, on the last run of shows, there was a minute where we thought we'd all got COVID. We were doing the Dirty Nil tour. We thought we had all got COVID. And so we all went to like Tesco's and got a bunch of tests. And it turns out none of us had COVID. We were just probably getting the flu or whatever.
Right.
And Lee normally gets Greg's, but if we go to Tesco's or something, he'll get like
Baps.
cheese baps, basically. He'll buy some baps and some butter and some cheese. And he didn't have nothing to spread the butter in the bun with.
Right.
The only thing flat and long was the COVID test he'd just taken. So we'll have to put it up on the socials.
Hey.
I've never heard of a more inventive use of a COVID test. I'm sure there are them out there, but that is
I'll make sure that sees the light of the day on socials. I've filmed the whole thing.
Amazing. Again, maybe that'll be a thing for future tours.
Yeah.
It'll catch.
Nice one, man. Nice one. Well, I got a few more, about 4 or 5 more, and I want to talk about new stuff. I want to talk about new material. So obviously, Liar's the most recent thing you brought out. You brought out a string of singles. Obviously, Burn Forever as an EP. In terms of where you're at, in terms of like kind of the influences behind the sound, for me as a listener, it feels like a lot of the songs are based around kind of cutting through bullshit, kind of finding. It sounds like a counselor thing to say, but kind of like trying to find your real authentic selves. You know, I use Hey You as an example there. I think Liar is about that. I don't know if that's my perception, but it's kind of like you guys, again, kind of letting go of all the bullshit of the past and maybe kind of letting go of the bullshit around you, you know, in your respective places. That seems maybe like quite deep. But in terms of your lyrical inspiration and what the songs mean to you guys, does that sort of track? Is any of that? Does that kind of feel right to any of you?
That's exactly it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think like for us, you know, we're trying to I wouldn't say I'm a doom and gloom person, but I wouldn't say I'm like a super happy person either. Like I think, you know, we have in the past like accidentally slipped into writing a positive song, and then we both kind of look at each other and we're like, yeah. So what we try and do now is write like uplifting music, but with a darker belly undertone of, you know, the actual lyrics. But I see what you're doing, connecting those dots. I think there's a lot of self-discovery in our music, because obviously we've been on our own paths and journeys. You know, and when we kind of write lyrical content, like it's usually like embedded in some of the struggles that we've gone through ourselves, you know what I mean? Like I know Lee was writing a lot during COVID and stuff, right? And obviously, like I don't want to go and hit that pandemic nail on the head, right? Like, but it was a unique time for everybody, right? And people were kind of a little more focused in, like a lot of the noise went away because they didn't have to do things. Some people were unemployed, lost their jobs or whatever. And a lot of people were at home with like kind of like, what do I do now, right? So for creatives in some ways, you know, having uninterrupted focused time was great. But then also, right, there was not really a lot of other social interactions or things to write about, right? Like normally you're going through your day to day, having experiences or feeling things or seeing things, hearing about things, right? And the sort of the news just click to one thing, right? There's one story, and then you're also living in that story, and you're in your house, and so I think that self-discovery was inevitable, and introvert, like inward thinking, sorry, was inevitable at that point, right? So I think a lot of the stuff, we Hey You and all that like before the pandemic, but nature of the beast, we're the kind of writers we are, so and we think very similar. If Lee comes with a lyric idea and we work together on it, right, like we're very aligned with kind of where it's going and vice versa. So I think that there is always kind of a common thread. There's a few places that we've broke out of it on the upcoming record, but like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of synchronicity there.
Yeah. I think like in terms of just the impact it has on people. I think there was a press quote about Liar, and it was like sort of trying to what was it? Yeah, feeling like you don't fit in to the point of creating a fake world in an attempt to feel more comfortable. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Is that your intention? Obviously, again, you're writing for yourselves, but I think a lot of your stuff, again, whether that's somebody picking up on the melody and being inspired, or someone picking up on the lyrics. I don't know if this is a bit of a reach compared, for what you just said there, Luke, but is there a hopeful undertone to this band? Where are you hoping that somebody listens to it if they're going through a tough time and they find something in it? Or, what is the hope from you guys direct to the listener? What do you want people to take from it?
I want them to take whatever they want from it, right? So like part of what I like about what you've told us about what you've taken from the music is your perspective, right? So we could never write a song in someone else's perspective, really, right? Like, so one of the things that I feel like is the magic of music is whatever our intention is, it could be, we feel and wrote a song about this. Someone's interpretation about that could be completely different and not the same, right? And so I kind of like, I think what we try to do is like we are specific on things, but not so specific that it doesn't leave it open to suggestion. So for me, my goal is that anybody who could relate to our music, right? Like anybody that has a relationship with our music and their interpretation of our music, that's what it can mean to them. And I fully value that because that's what I get from music, right? Like I've listened to songs that I've interpreted one way for years, and then maybe like I've just taken it for granted as that thing, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe I opened like the vinyl and looked at the lyrics, and then like reading them on paper is kind of presented something else to me, you know what I mean? Like, so an example of that is, Smashing Pumpkins being one of my favorite bands, Melancholy. I didn't realize that was like, I didn't realize until about 3 years ago that was an album with like an overarching story with characters that are reoccurring through songs, right? Like that missed me, and so as a kid, like those songs have been with me since like 1995. Yeah. Like they're part of my, like I hear 1979 and it'll remind me of being like, it reminds me of like leaving high school and like smoking cigarettes in the middle of the field in the sunshine whilst drinking the bottle of Scrumpy Jack, you know what I mean? It's like, that's what it, but I never like dug so deep into the lyrics, but I was like, I love this band and everything about it. And then all of a sudden, all these years later, I find that Billy had actually, and it was actually that interview you sent me, Lee, that Dan Carter had done with him and him and Jimmy during the pandemic. They did a Zoom talk, and Billy actually talks about the characters in that. So I think like we're not that deep. We don't have characters or like we're not writing themed records. Not to say we won't ever, but I think for us at this point, I think that we like to leave the door open enough to be like we're getting across like what we're feeling and the our intention is, but it's art, it's interpretive, right? So you go stare at that painting, it could give you a completely different emotion than someone else. Sometimes I listen back to our songs and it'll literally give me anxiety. We wrote a couple of songs just pre-pandemic, and we wrote some lyrics and I listened to the lyrics, and it made me feel kind of horrible inside. I was like, "Oh, this makes me feel so weird." And I try and sit with it and figure out what does that make me feel like? Why does it make me feel like that, right? But I'm like, it's making me feel a certain way, like I got a pulse. So like, it's going to make somebody else feel that way, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm waffling anyway. Lee may have some of
Good. No, that was right. Like, they are relatable lyrics, but it is the same as what Luke said now, is when you, like, I had to write like a blurb thing for the next single the other day, but it's weird to, like, especially that song that we don't really play live yet, it's weird to read back the lyrics and be like, oh, maybe this is about this, or, you know, it takes you out of the moment of writing it a little bit. So it's nice to look back on them, and obviously timestamps a time when you did it, but yeah, maybe we will write a concept record one day. That'd be kind of fun.
And yeah, like I gotta say,
hard. It'd be fucking hard.
Obviously, Dom, you know we've got a record coming out. Like it's it's not like announced. I mean, it's obvious. We've been sitting on it for ages. But
yeah,
there's a song in there that Lee just went away and wrote the lyrics to that, like literally take my head off, right? Like they're you know, sometimes when, and the funny thing is, like, obviously, you know, Dan Carter signed us or whatever, he also has a massive attachment to that song, like, and he's asked us what's it about, right? Like, you know, and Lee wrote these lyrics that are like some of my favorite lyrics in a song that I've been a part of ever, right? And it's the song's called Closer Than You Know, and it's just, I won't spoil it too much. Like maybe when we talk again and you've listened to the song after the album comes out, we can go more into depth about what it's about. But like, you know, his inspiration and then like what he delivered and like listening to him, like literally makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And it's like, I'm in the band, like I was a part of the creation of the music and like making it come to life. And he's just put these lyrics on this music and like I'm being affected by it in the band. So I'm like, that's ultimately what music is about for me, like that kind of creation and having that kind of effect from a piece of art, like you know, that's living like I'm alive, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, man, absolutely. I think that, you know, to sort of round up, I've got three more before we finish up, and I do want to talk about, you know, being signed to Spinefarm, having, you know, Dan Carter believe in you guys, and having, you know, all this lovely press come at you, you know, nice press releases, lovely photos, etc. What is this record and being supported by such a globally renowned label, what does it mean to you guys? Again, reflecting on all the stuff you went through to be here now with this band that represents kind of so much peace. Not, well, you know what I mean? It represents you guys, maybe, you know, finding that happy safe space. I think you called it, Luke. I think finding that support with this safe space in this music, in this band, what does it mean to you?
I mean, it's great having them on board. They're an unbelievably great team for us so far. It's also nice because they came to us and they believe in what we're doing. Like we had it for a few years with this band where we were just, you know, trying to get deals and managers and agents and stuff. And we've always been, I don't want to force people to do something they don't want to do. Do you know what I mean? Like main thing with this band, like we came out of the gate with like really great shows, really great tours. And it was purely of just people believing in us and the music. And then I feel like they actually do. We had another deal that kind of fell through on the table, and then Dan came to us and was like, I fucking really want this. And it was just like, cool, let's try and make it happen. I mean, and they've been great. They've been really great so far, and they believe in what we're doing. And they're kind of, I don't say they're letting us do whatever the hell we want, but there's no like super interference so far. And we've all known Dan for a long time, and we all like the same shit. Like we also, I mean, now he's like, especially for like art inspiration and stuff like that, we have like a group text like chat, and we really do value his opinion on some of the stuff like that is more valuable than our opinion. Do you know what I mean? It's nice to, it's not like it's pointing us in a certain direction kind of thing, but it's nice to bounce it off another person that we also love and believe in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
been really him as a A&R guy is the fucking dream for us. So
it's awesome because, like, I mean, Lee just nailed it. You know, like the reality for me was when we were talking about it, like me and Dan had a conversation. I've known Dan years, right? Like he's like a brother, you know, and he was kind of like, I, I haven't signed any mates. He's like, I'm signing a mate, you know, like we gotta, you know, we kind of established some ground rules because like I was just like,
Yeah,
look, man, like we're gonna be mates no matter what happens with this, you know what I mean? Like so, and then obviously now that it's all done and we're working together, you know, it's awesome because one of the other things that we set out was like we love doing this and we want to keep it like as pure as possible. And by that I mean like we wouldn't ever want to convince anybody to work with this band, right? Like we're not trying to convince anybody. I think for us, we've always managed to be lucky enough to have people that really want to work with us because they listen to music and they're excited by it, or
yeah,
you know, there's something else there that just kind of is like, yeah, I want to do this, right? So I think we've kind of had this rule of trying not to convince people that they need to do something, you know. And we've had a couple of missteps along the way. We've worked with a few people where it hasn't worked out, right? You know, maybe we kind of joined and it was kind of like that, and then it transcended somewhere else. But we're in a position right now where we just work with great people. And for me, I mean, like, it's not rock and roll to tell people your age, but like, I'm 42. I didn't think I'd ever sign a record deal again.
yeah.
Like we started this band and we were just making music because of the innocence that we talked about earlier on, right? So to now like be signed, we work with an incredible booking agent that is also one of my long dear friends that like I've literally known since my early teens. And he's amazing. We have an incredible manager. You know, so really for me, it's like, wow, you can make some music, sign a record deal and work with all your friends and like nothing's miserable. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's kind of hard for us at the minute with like trying to fit into some shows that are going around in the UK market. Again, like everything's kind of high tech and like maybe they don't want a four-piece noisy grunge band opening for them, but outside of that, man, like everything's enjoyable. And so
Good.
signing to Spinefarm, it being with the team, and just it's something that we didn't think would happen, and it has happened, and so it's something we don't take for granted.
Yeah.
And so we're really happy that we're in this position, you know.
Yeah, I love it for you guys, and well deserved. And just before I sort of do the plug-in stuff and the, you know, the promo bit, you know, obviously Burn Forever is out there. People can, you know, people can hear that. People have been streaming the singles thousands and thousands of times. Where, you know, from Burn Forever, where you were then, to obviously this new record, what does that, what does it represent to you in terms of evolution? You know, what could people expect? What can you tell me about this new record that's coming out? I know there's some stuff you won't be able to tell me, but where, you know, people, from what people can hear to this new record, where are you guys at? What can you tell me about it?
Go on, Lee.
I mean, it's not like we've changed entirely. We kind of, it sounds like that older stuff still. I mean, Burn Forever we wrote, fuck me, man. How long ago was that now? 6
Well,
years?
that was like more. So, "Burn Forever" is the one song that was kind of like written out before me and Lee had started together, right? Like, I didn't really do anything on "Burn." That's a Lee golden nugget right there. So like Lee was writing with another lad and didn't work out, and that was kind of the first song that got brought to the band. So we just, all I literally did was like, oh, that's your drum beat, cool, I'll actually really play it instead of it being finger punched. And I think we changed like one tiny melody, but like, yeah, that's a Lee Goldie. So like that's what I like when we get more raw, unfiltered Lee. You know, when he'll just go off and be like, I've done a song start to finish, right? And you're like, fucking hell, that rips. You know, so obviously, like we're a band, we're collaborative, we all work together. But you know, every now and then, Lee will just be like, "I've done this," and you're like, "What? That's insane, right?" And so, "Burn" was one of those. That song got me like fired up when I first heard it, and probably responsible for us actually getting together and doing this whole thing. So, the journey from then to now, you know, like definitely, I think there's a lot more. I think there's a little bit more dynamic to this record than that first collection of songs that was intended to be a record. Like we've definitely grown and turned a corner a little bit, but it's still the same still the same vibe. You know, obviously we worked with a different producer. We worked with Adrian Bushby and recorded it in the UK, which was also very nice. So yeah, I
Right.
think that, you know, but the funny thing is, man, like long and short of it is we've already started writing the next album, right? Because we've been sat on this for so long, we've already started writing the next album. And I feel like now we're looking at those two pieces of work, bodies of work, and we're being like, little bit of that was missing over here, and we absolutely love that. So let's bring more of that back in, right? So it's
Yeah.
like we're kind of already doing that sort of stuff, but you know, there's already 6 or 7 songs written for the next album. So hopefully, now that there's a label, now there's a process, we're not going to have massive gaps, right? Like, because the thing for me, that's the only pain point with this band that's made me bummed, is not having the creativity that we created at that time go out, right? We recorded the
Yeah.
album in the pandemic. We were in England taking COVID tests in the pandemic to be able to get in the country. It's 2024. The album still hasn't come out, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, it's coming this year. I can't tell you the date, but you'll know real soon. But like,
Nice.
yeah, so I think from here on out, you know, I think that we're gonna have a steady stream of music coming out a lot faster than it's been, and I'm glad that we have a vehicle to do that now.
Yeah,
You know.
man. Yeah, me too, guys. Me too. In terms of rounding up, is there a message for your families back home now that you're, you know, Americanized? No. Is there a message for the people that have supported you, the listeners? I know there's still a lot of fans of other bands you've been in, fans of yourselves and your body of work that are going to be so excited about this record. What is the message to family, friends, fans, supporters who have got behind Lowlives, you guys as individuals, and will continue to do so?
We'll come and see them a lot more this year, hopefully.
Yeah.
We've neglected them the last couple of years. So this year we can actually come and do some shit, hopefully.
Yeah, I think the reality is, right, there's that running joke, right, of like bands on Instagram, they get the "come to Brazil" comment. I don't know if you're familiar with the "come to Brazil."
Yeah.
So our version of the "come to Brazil" comment is "where's your album?" Right? So like I feel like I feel an immense guilt for those people that are kind of die hard into our band. You know, we've seen a lot of Low Lives tattoos coming up, which is like, it kind of
Mental.
knocks the wind out my chest every time I see one, because I'm like, wow, like you're that committed to this band and we've barely done anything, right? And so like, you know, this album, man, is for all of those people that have waited and been patient, understood that it's not easy. You know, we were literally on the release button. The album was going to come out last year. We were about to self-release. We were like, cool. We had a roadmap and everything structured out to release the album last year as a self-release, because we didn't have a label. And then Spinefarm like came in and was like, Dan was like, I really want to do it. Don't self-release. And then obviously then you're on kind of like industry business times of how long it takes to do a deal and all that stuff. So that's ultimately why it didn't come out last year, right? You know, and I feel like we'd kind of given an inclination and threatened that the album was going to drop last year, and here we are in February 2024. So I feel bad for all those people that have waited for an album, you know, and I hope that it's worth it to them when it finally drops. I hope they like it, and you know, I think that they should know that from our side, we are absolutely trying to follow up with another record very quickly after this one. So we don't plan on leaving you high and dry. We're not short of material. We've written a lot of songs. Might be a load of shit. We don't know, but yeah, like, thank you for the patience and thank you for sticking around with us and believing in us. You know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and people will continue to do so, I'm sure. I'm very excited. In terms of closing out, then last question: is there anything I've missed? Have I done my job properly? Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you can say that you want to say as we finish up, lads?
No, you've done fantastic, Tom. It's always the best talking to you.
It's always a pleasure, man. I love it. Love what you're doing. And thanks so much for wanting to come back and have us.
Of course, man. Always. It's an absolute pleasure. And I'm so excited to see what you do in the future. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me, lads.
Yeah,
Amazing.
awesome. Thanks for having us.